All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials World podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? Of course, we're both from Wisconsin. Wisconsin is known for many amazing things, like having the skinniest people in the country,
And the smartest.
the smartest, generally the most tan, just most beautiful people in the world. But, there's something as a Wisconsinite I've never done before, which is just binge drink my entire life. I've never done that before. Would you believe that? I mean, looking at my face, I look bloated all the fucking time.
Yeah, I definitely have never had a period in my life where I was drinking a crazy amount and yeah, that's crazy how people do that, how they just drink and put their bodies through the ringer when they're like 20 and just destroy their liver. That's nuts.
It really fucking is. And you know what? I've thought, considering I've never done this, and this is just something that every Wisconsinite ever has ever done, including Wisconsinites who aren't even born yet. I thought, how about I drink 3 square meals a day of alcohol for 30 days and chart my progress in a log that everybody can just find out the information on? Like, I didn't even know this was a thing that anybody else has done. I don't think it has. So I'm doing it for myself. You know what I mean?
Well, World of T-shirts is currently doing this.
All right, damn it. I thought I was the first one to do this. Wait, I'm also getting word from our handlers, Brian, that there was a documentary about a guy who ate McDonald's only for 30 days and had a myriad of health problems. Wait, you're telling me that he only ate McDonald's and now he literally just died? Are you serious? This is insane. I thought you can only end up this way through alcohol, but apparently you can end up this way only eating McDonald's. That's crazy to me.
And the thing is, hearing about this guy who I've never heard of before his death, I just think I'd like to pour one out for him. And I feel like he might not like that.
I don't think so either. And, speaking of pouring one out for a gentleman who just died, so that leads perfectly into our review this week of the Morgan Spurlock documentary, Super Size Me. But before we get into our review this week, Brian, let's bring back our segment, Cringe Generational Moment of the Week. Woo! Yeah! All right. And I did not give you a hint on what this cringe generational moment of the week. Of course, this is my episode this week, so I chose the cringe generational moment. And I found an article I first saw this article a long time ago, but I just remembered it when I suggested we review this documentary because, spoilers ahead to the audience at home who are not familiar with Super Size Me, the director just died like 2 weeks ago as of recording this episode.
Yeah, and before we even get started, I think we are going to make fun of the guy, but we're going to try, I think, to keep it within reason because he did just die.
Yeah, keep it within reason. I criticize him for obviously the bad things that he did, but we're not going to go overboard necessarily with criticizing him.
I mean, I'm going to say this guy seems to have sucked, in several ways.
Undeniably a piece of shit.
But I don't know. He's got, not that they're going to hear this, but he's got a mom and he's, got what, you know what I mean? But the guy sucked.
Yeah, guy sucked. Exactly. But, speaking of people that sucked, well, maybe this isn't this person's fault, but my cringe generational moment this week is an article that I saw once again years ago, but it just clicked back in my memory when I suggested this episode. But the header of this article says, teenage boy goes blind after existing on Pringles, white bread, and French fries. And this was an article that was on CNN. It came out in a lot of different, websites, but the CNN one was the most concise one. So the body of the article says, eating a diet of French fries, Pringles, and white bread was enough to make one teenage boy lose his eyesight, according to a case study published in a medical journal. Scientists from the University of Bristol, England, examined the case of a young patient whose extremely picky eating led to blindness and have warned of the dangers of a poor diet. The unidentified patient told doctors he had only eaten fries from his fish and chip shop, from his local fish and chip shop. He didn't own one. That would have been hilarious.
Figures.
Yeah. Pringles, potato chips.
I'd be a picky eater if I lived over there too.
Hey, listen, having just been to England for the first time like a month and a half ago, I will say the food is better than you think, but it is not the world's best cuisine. I'm going to be honest with you. It's just not.
If that guy had grown up in America, he'd be able to handle that because that's how we all eat.
That's very true.
Get fucked, pussy.
And in Wisconsin, we also eat a different kind of fried fish. We also eat cannibal sandwiches because, of course, that's a thing you can only get in Wisconsin.
Oh, see, in my family, we called those wildcats.
Tiger meat sandwich is another one I've heard, too.
I've never heard that one. That's pretty good, though. Cannibal sandwich is the one that I think reflects what it is the best.
Oh, yeah. It really is. It eats you from the inside for sure. I also love that
I've never eaten one of those, dude. I've never done that.
literally every year the Wisconsin Department of Health puts out a public statement like, please stop eating these, and all like the 70-year-olds are like, fuck you, I'm gonna drink 10 beers for dinner and then for breakfast, and I'm gonna eat 5 cannibal sandwiches today.
God, that must give you such fucking diarrhea.
Oh my god, I would not want to be within 100 feet of that bathroom afterwards. Oh my god.
My grandpa would eat them once in a while, and I just didn't know. I was like, how is this better than cooking the burger?
Yeah, right. Oh god.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We're getting back to the article. So he also ate slices of processed ham and sausage at elementary school, and he avoided foods with certain textures. He first visited a doctor at age 14, complaining of tiredness, according to a case report published in the Annals of Internal Medicine on Monday. He wasn't taking any medication, had a normal BMI and height, and showed no visible signs of malnutrition. Doctors discovered low vitamin B12 levels and anemia. Well, actually, that's not true. If this is no visible signs of malnutrition, if you're anemic and you have low B12 levels, that's actually pretty fairly visible. As somebody who's worked in healthcare for 7 years.
If he's being described as anemic, that denotes being underweight, right? He must have looked maybe not emaciated, but
not good. Probably a very skinny, fat build would be my guess, plus very pale and very weak. So very visible thing, but hey, whatever.
Basically, he looks like the third host of Millennials Are Old.
Yeah, we should get this kid on the show one day to talk about if he can figure out how to fucking work a computer if he can't see anymore.
We'll get him a Braille keypad. It's good.
Yeah. Doctors discovered low vitamin B12 levels and anemia, treating the patient with vitamin B12 injections and offering dietary advice. 1 year later, there were signs of hearing loss and vision symptoms, but doctors did not find the cause. His vision had worsened to the point of blindness by 17 years old, and doctors identified B12 deficiency, low copper, and selenium levels, a high zinc level, reduced vitamin D level, and bone density level, according to a statement from the University of Bristol. Now, once again, I am a healthcare professional. I've worked in healthcare for 7 years now. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I want that to be very clear. But reading all these things, low B12, low copper, selenium, high zinc, reduced vitamin D, and low bone density, that's something that you would see in an elderly patient who's not living well. That is just the low
bone density thing has me fucked up.
Yeah, low bone density. Crazy. Low bone density is either somebody who has like a significant propensity for that, like for example, if they have like a condition that would cause that, or they're like elderly. No 17-year-old should have this. This is insane to think about.
Sad, man.
It fucking is. Jesus.
So what year was this kid born? I'm just curious about how old he was.
It said 17, so 2019. So 2002, 2001, maybe 2003, depending.
Okay.
So would not have saw 9/11. So definitely not a millennial. So definitely Gen Z kid here.
Yeah, we don't claim this one.
Yeah, we don't. Researchers from Bristol Medical School and the Bristol Eye Hospital examined the case and concluded that the patient suffered nutritional optic neuropathy, a dysfunction of the optic nerve. Now, once again, optic neuropathy is something that you get with diabetic patients who are not like taking care of their diabetes, and mostly type 2 diabetes. So that's something that you normally get when you're like middle-aged or older and you've lived a shit life. So this kid is just all types of fucked. Like this kid is just not doing good at all.
Him avoiding textures?
Yeah, so I was actually going to get to that at the end of the article. My guess is that this kid's probably pretty autistic would be my guess.
That's what I was wondering as well.
Because there's something called a super taster, and there's like just general levels of like fussy eating with like autistic kids, and both of them can be symptoms of autism. I know fussy eaters can be just a sign of OCD, but of course OCD, a lot of people with OCD are also autistic, so it's one of those things. A lot of
overlap.
So there's a lot of overlap, and my guess would be that this kid is probably on the spectrum somewhere, would be my guess. I would bet probably a good amount of money that this kid was autistic.
That's kind of what I was wondering too. And you got to think too, and I don't want to, this is legitimately like sad. Like I feel much worse for this kid than I feel for, I mean, I'm not happy Morgan Spurlock's dead, but you got to think at some point that means his parents kind of just gave up on helping him develop better habits. And it probably was hard, especially if he was on the spectrum, which I guess we don't know if he was. But at some point they had to be like, hey, you can't eat smoked sausage all day long.
Yeah, seriously. You can't live on a diet of Greg's sausage rolls and fucking like Walker's chips. The UK heads will get what I'm talking about on that one. Like you can't live on that for the rest of your life. I don't know why you'd want to, but you can't.
Those Walker's chips, when you sent me the picture, those sounded kind of fire though.
Honestly, I will say you know what? This might be a controversial take. I think Walker's chips are better than like American Lay's chips. I mean, they're the same company, but they obviously have different like fucking chemical formulations because of course like half the ingredients in America are illegal in like most of Europe. But
Jesus Christ, man.
but I will say the chips, not they call them crisps. I'm calling them chips. This is my cultural like imperialism. They're called chips. They're not called crisps. But chips in the UK, I would say, are better than America. Just my personal opinion. But that's not here.
Yeah, I want to try some. I mean, what was it? You sent me some pickled hot chip thing, and it looked really good.
Yeah, they're Monster Munch, which are pickled onion chips. That's what they are. And then the other one was curry. The other one was curry, which I've had curry chips in America, but they just weren't nearly as good. I'm going to be honest with you.
Okay.
But yeah, finishing up the article here, this case highlights the impact of diet on visual and physical health, and the fact that calorie intake and BMI are not reliable indicators of nutritional status. That is also very true. Morgan Spurlock, you kind of missed that fucking one. We're certainly going to get to that when we talk about this documentary. The researchers say that poor diet and reduced intake of minerals cause vision loss in this case, and warn that nutritional optic neuropathy could become more common due to the consumption of junk food. They also warn vegans to make sure to supplement for vitamin B12 to avoid deficiency. And Carl Buchner and Sean Mutaki want to know your location, the person who wrote this article. Like, they're like, yeah, no, fuck you. We're perfect.
Yeah, they're coming for you.
To prevent similar cases, doctors should ask patients about their dietary history as part of routine clinical examinations, the researchers urged. And there's a couple other paragraphs they talk about. There was a guy from King's College in London who said that the case report was maybe not accurate, but that's not here nor there. But either way, this kid, because of probably some OCD, maybe some spectrum stuff, who knows, basically ate himself into disability. And not even like ate himself like 500 pounds into disability. This is like an insane example to me, like just insane. Like I can't even fathom like this happening. And, you know, interestingly enough, to talk about like the nutrition stuff, right? Like, so back in, I want to say, I think it was World War I and then later World War II. So first off, table salt did not used to have iodine in it. And a lot of people, particularly in the upper Midwest, would get horrible goiters, which is a symptom of iodine deficiency. And it can also cause mental like retardation. Just I'm using the clinical, the old clinical word there.
Yeah.
But it can cause mental deficiencies. There we go. I'm going to be politically correct and offensive on this episode. But they put iodine in salt because that was like a common food additive back then. And of course it still is now. And that was a way to get iodine in people. And it basically got rid of goiters overnight. And then later on, they added like a bunch of minerals in like, you know, grocery store bread because that wasn't a thing. And a lot of people would join the army in World War II were like twigs, like they couldn't fucking like raise a rifle over their head, you know? So it's one of those things where like to have in this modern age where everything, especially talk about bread and everything, how much bread is fortified with vitamins and minerals to still be that vitamin deficient is crazy to me. Like you never see those kind of food deficiencies in the Western world anymore. That's like one of the positive things I could say about our food culture.
I'd be curious to see if anyone's done an update on this kid. I mean, I guess it's possible that his name hasn't been released, and that's certainly fair. But I'd be curious to see how he's doing. I mean, he's straight up like blind now, right?
Yeah, essentially. I did not do any.
Sucks.
I didn't do any further research, I'll be honest, but all the articles that I found that listed this did not have a follow-up.
You know, maybe this kid could have been saved this fate if someone had just made him watch Super Size Me in school.
Was picking up making people watch Super Size Me. So let's get into the details of this movie. So this movie came out in 2004. It actually came out in May 2004. So this movie just turned 20 years old. And the first trivia fact I had here was 3 weeks before the theatrical release, McDonald's CEO Jim Cantalupo died of a heart attack very suddenly at age 60. This was not mentioned in the documentary's production ended in December of 2003, and filming was done before then. So I thought that was very interesting.
That's crazy because Spurlock seems like the type of dude who would run a victory lap around someone's death, which I guess is what we're about to do.
He loved doing victory laps around people's misery, so...
Yeah, he did. This movie, this is the angriest I've been... So... I had seen this movie several times before. In high school, I was made to watch it 3 different times.
I was made to watch it in middle school and high school.
Yeah. So teachers fucking loved showing this movie. And, you know, at the time, I think I just took it at face value. It seemed like a good movie. You know, it is like as a movie, it's pretty well made. It's well edited. It's got a narrative. When they were showing it to me in school, this made me pretty angry. Watching this in 2024 made me at least as angry as Cop. Probably more because Cop is entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. And Cop wasn't like nearly as influential on a lot of fucking public policy as this movie was.
Right.
Although I will say the public policy that came after it wasn't necessarily bad. And
No,
we'll
I don't
certainly
really.
get into it with
Yeah.
obviously the aftermath of it. But yeah, I mean, like, just Morgan Spurlock, we don't really talk about Gen X that much on the show, but he exudes so much Gen X liberal
Yes,
smugness. It's
he's
crazy.
so Gen X. He's such an ad busters motherfucker. And that's the thing that sucks about this movie. We will be, I'm sure, coming back to this throughout. It's so mean spirited. And it's not, sometimes I remember as I sort of became disillusioned with this movie, in my 20s and stuff, and I'd say, that's kind of a weird documentary and some of it doesn't make sense. And people who just like, they'd be like, what? I mean, who cares about, even if he is lying? It's, what do you care about the fast food companies? It's like, well, no. But his view of like the average American who buys and eats fast food is so mean spirited and so contemptuous, and he's so fucking self-righteous about, because it's not like he's like he doesn't, I mean, there are moments of sympathy for people in this movie, but it all comes, it's very paternalistic, and it's also just like, look at all of you slobs, what's wrong with you, why do you eat this slop, look, I'm eating it for this movie, but I wouldn't if I didn't have to, you just eat it because you love it because you're a bunch of fucking piggies.
Yeah, in all honesty, Dick Cheney has a more positive view of the world than fucking Morgan Spurlock does. Like straight
I mean,
up, like
I don't know if I'd say more positive. I would bet they're similar in, probably not their specific politics. This is a very, just a mean-spirited movie towards like basically poor people, towards all kinds of marginalized people. Kind of get it in this movie, and I'm sure Spurlock didn't even realize it as he was doing it.
no, I guarantee you not. And then this movie was rated PG-13. And then speaking of Morgan Spurlock, so he directed, wrote, and produced this movie. And Morgan Spurlock is most known for being involved in such films. And he didn't make all these movies, but he was involved in all these movies. So he was like a production assistant on such movies as Leon the Professional, Kiss of Death, the Barbie Schrader Nick Cage movie. And, if you really hate Michael Rapaport, and I fucking hate Michael Rapaport, I hated him even before his like psycho Zionist turn. But if you really hate him, watch Kiss of Death because he dies a horrific, like brutal death in that movie. It's awesome. I love seeing it.
I mean, obviously Rappaport is scumbag, a dumbass, but he is in True Romance. He's great in it. But no, I don't think, I haven't seen Kiss of Death. Wait, Morgan Spurlock worked on Leon the Professional?
That was his first movie. He was a like second line unit, like I think it was like some sort of like production assistant on Leon the Professional. Yeah.
And I guess that makes sense because like I had said, this movie is pretty above average competently made. So he'd been floating around in the industry for probably most of his life by this point already.
Yeah, exactly. Like at least since like the early 90s for sure. And of course, he wrote and directed this movie most famously. He also had a cameo in the slasher movie Drive Thru. He made the documentary Where in the World is Osama bin Laden? He was in Freakonomics. Tom Wonderful presents the greatest movie ever sold, which is another documentary of his I saw. The Other F Word. He also directed, and this one was fucking insane to me. He directed the One Direction documentary and music film, This Is Us, which is hilarious because I remember like,
why?
I don't know, it's bizarre.
Like, I don't like One Direction and I don't like Morgan Spurlock, but I kind of feel like both of them, in a sense, deserve better.
Yeah,
I'm
think
serious.
so too.
I'm serious. That One Direction at least deserved to have maybe kind of, I don't know, you would think maybe some kind of like auteur kind of like industry plant gay guy directing their film, and then Morgan Spurlock should get to do his preachy Gen X shit. Like, why did they have to be fucking saddled with each other?
It's bizarre. It is genuinely bizarre. Like when I read that, I'm like, no fucking way. And I looked it up, and yep, that's the case. He also directed and this was his final film that he directed, Super Size Me 2 Holy Chicken. And I'm gonna explain why that was his last film in a little bit. But I also saw that one, and that documentary I would say is actually quite a bit better and less mean-spirited than this movie by quite a bit. It's a movie essentially about the like hyper exploitation, even by like factory farming standards, of like the chicken farming industry, because the chicken farming industry might be the single worst section of factory farming, and that's saying something.
I mean, it's evil.
It's bad. It's bad for everybody, except for obviously like Tyson and stuff like that. But it's bad for the chickens. It's bad for the farmers. It's bad for it's just horrible.
No, it's one of those things. I'm not. We talked about this a bit on our Hardline series. I don't know a lot about the animal rights movement. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian. Sometimes I think I probably should become one, but I like probably won't anytime soon. If I'm being honest, it's not. But I mean, it's hard to learn anything about chicken farming and not kind of shudder at the idea that this is just the thing we do, both because it's so clearly inhumane, but because like you said, it's bad for everyone except for like some massive corporation.
Yeah, God, Jesus Christ. And then Brian, you're gonna love this one. He was I think he was either the like lead director, like showrunner for this specific thing, but he was involved in the Simpsons 20th anniversary special 3D on Ice, which I'm sure, Brian, you definitely watched. I know you definitely watched.
Fuck, I didn't fucking see that 20th anniversary. So that would have been what,
2009? Yeah.
I would have been 2009, 2010. I would have been done following up with the series by that point. I mean, I probably was still watching it occasionally on Sundays. That at least kind of makes, I mean, I love classic Simpsons. I don't need to belabor it. I don't think we'll ever do a Simpsons episode because I can't. I'm just going to gush about how good it was and how bad it is now. It at least makes some sense that Morgan Spurlock and The Simpsons in 2010 would do something together. He probably was a fan of the show, given his age and the type of smug lib he is. I'm sure that's bad, but it makes more sense than the One Direction thing, you know?
Oh, no, for sure. And just looking it up, yeah, he directed that specific episode. So, yeah, imagine the 20th anniversary of one of the most famous television shows of all time is directed by Morgan fucking Spurlock.
I wish I'd known that before recording. I would have watched it. I would have watched it last night.
This movie is 98 minutes long, and the next trivia fact I had here is Morgan Spurlock shot 250 hours of footage. Less than 1% of this footage appears in the final cut, obviously 90 minutes, and some extra footage is included on the DVD release, which I used to have the DVD release, and I don't know what happened to it. I was looking for it when I chose this episode, I just couldn't find it, so I must have gave it away a long time ago. I don't even fucking know.
I bet the audio commentary in that is so fucking annoying.
Oh, I bet. He's like, oh, yeah, this is the part where I ate a bunch of food and lied about my medical history. Oh, shit, I already spoiled it. But, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, we'll certainly get into how a lot of this documentary is just straight up fabricated. It is just a straight up lie, a lot of this is. And I'm not saying that to like, stick up for McDonald's, because fuck McDonald's. But,
yeah,
like,
of course.
If you're going to lie to the public about, like, public health information, that makes you, I would say, close to as much of an evil person as you could be outside of, like, directly murdering people. Like, lying about public health information on such a large platform makes you an evil person. I'm sorry. It just does.
Well, and of course, we're going to get into, like we said, this movie is very mean-spirited, not to the super rich, not to corporations, but to people who are in fast food, people who have weight problems. It's not nice. But the other thing that I would say, and Taylor, I think you'd probably agree with me on this, when you lie about, like, when you tell a lie for the public good and the public health, and I mean, people find out eventually that you're lying. It's like when we used to lie to kids about marijuana, and we'd be like, marijuana is addictive and it's going to kill you, just like all the other drugs. Well, when kids find out that that's bullshit, you know, if you're a kid like me, then you're going to do a bunch of drugs when you're like 16. Because you're like, well, they lied to me about weed. These are probably all fine, which is a thing that happens. And I kind of feel like you could say the same thing for this, is that if someone has believed, well, I saw Super Size Me and he said fast food was bad, but that guy lied about everything in that movie. So probably it's not that bad.
That's probably why schools showed it, because it was just like over-exaggerated lies, which they do about fucking drug stuff.
Yeah, it was totally in keeping with that. Instead of just saying like, hey, this isn't actually fast food and casual drugs. I would say, not trying to belittle anyone's experiences with substances. I've had my own on and off. I've been in a good place for a long time now and whatever. But you could make some comparisons. You say, this is a thing that a lot of people do. It's not really good for you. It's actually pretty bad for you. But if you're going to do it, you may as well learn how to do it in, a semi-responsible way and kind of take care of yourself while you do it. And doing it doesn't make you a bad person. But if you can do it less or not do it at all.
Exactly. Very mitigated harm kind of way, instead of just the all or nothing, which, like we just talked about, the all or nothing thing is it's just not sustainable in a society that is built on excess. It just is not.
Yeah. Well, like, one of the things, he doesn't really talk about it, because I'm sure Morgan Spurlock is one of those guys who, even though he talks about the public school system, strikes me as I don't like kids guy. But a thing that I think about a lot is how many parents, even to this day, I see who live in cities say, like, well, we take parents take their little kids to McDonald's because there's playlands there. Places don't have parks.
Yeah, and he mentioned that in the documentary, just kind of like,
okay,
a little bit, but it's not really enough to like focus on for more than like a second. But we talk about bloated and excess, Brian. So just real quick. So this movie had a budget of $65,000 and it grossed $22.2 million. And
damn, God bless him.
The next trivia fact I had here was related to that is When the movie opened in Australia, it had the highest opening gross ever for a documentary. It grossed 1 million Australian dollars, about $800,000 in the first 2 weeks of release. So this movie was very successful, along with, of course, being shown in schools a million times. So this movie made Morgan Spurlock a millionaire overnight.
So
like,
let's get it. This is the thing I was saying about watching this. Taylor, we are right in the age. As we said, we both were made to watch this movie multiple times in educational settings. We were alive when we watched this be just an absolute phenomenon when we were kids. Watching it now, do you think, why was this such a commercial success? Americans hate documentaries. Americans don't go to see documentaries in the theaters. Americans fucking love fast food. Why did people glom onto this so hard?
So my theory is why this documentary did so crazy is that I think a lot of people were swayed by the idea. Of course, people in general knew fast food wasn't good for you, right? But I think people were really itching for well, I mean, fast food's not good for you, but it's not going to kill you. And then this documentary is oh yeah, I ate McDonald's for 30 days and I almost died. Watch this documentary. And that to people is oh my God, this thing I do every day could kill me if I do it more than 2 times of what I normally do it. And I think that's what made people go to the fucking theater and watch it. And the whole conceit of that experiment is nonsense. So, I'm sorry, one more detail here. So on Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 92% critic score and a 72% audience score. So of course, critics love this movie. And it is you're right, it is a well-made documentary. Even if it is full of lies, it's a well-made documentary.
No, I mean, as a piece of filmmaking, it is good. If the goal of a documentary, is to find a topic and form a narrative around it, if that's your goal as a documentarian before educating, then this is a smashing success.
No, for sure. But, speaking of, I know we keep talking about the concept of this film, so let's get into the synopsis here. So, as the film begins, Spurlock is in above average physical shape, according to his personal trainer. He is seen by 3 physicians, in parentheses, a cardiologist, a gastroenterologist, and hepatologist, and an internist. Now, I want to highlight the gastroenterologist and the hepatologist because my first job ever working in healthcare was working in a GI and hepatology clinic. So a lot of the things that later came out of Morgan Spurlock's actual conduct is very hilarious to me because I'm reading all of the lab reports and all of his later findings, and I'm this doesn't strike me as a guy who's eating a lot of fast food, maybe consuming a lot of something else. Maybe. It's just, and to be fair, I know 2 of the physicians call it out directly on what he's probably consuming instead of fast food. And they call it out directly, and one of them even smiles while saying it. I think she knows specifically what the fuck he's doing, and it's not eating fast food that's killing him. Let's be honest.
The thing is that if you hadn't pointed that out, before my viewing, you actually said, hey, there's a scene, you kind of were telling me there's a part where one of the doctors smiles while alluding to his drinking. And so it made me think to watch out for that. And I probably wouldn't have noticed it if you hadn't called it out to me. But watching it then, you're oh, that is weird. It is weird that she draws attention to that and then makes that face.
Yeah, it's very funny, but that's nearly at the end. So you get a lot of bullshit first, and then you get that. And once again, having the medical knowledge and of course having the knowledge of what he admitted later on, seeing that now is absolutely hilarious because if anybody who even had a passing glance of nutrition back then would have been oh, this guy's just a fucking alcoholic. This guy is a chronic alcoholic. And like I said, having watched this now 20 years after it came out and having this requisite medical experience, having not watched this documentary in probably 15, 20 years, watching this now, I'm oh yeah, this guy's just a fucking alcoholic. And obviously eating McDonald's for every meal after probably not eating McDonald's almost ever is obviously going to have some pretty negative health outcomes for you, but it's not going to cause the issues that he has. It's just not going to. That's ridiculous.
Because the reality is, and I think if any of us, as a society had thought about this back in the day, you'd think a lot of us eat a lot of fast food. A lot of us eat fast food once or twice a week. I probably eat fast food once a week, maybe twice a week. If it was that immediately bad for you, I mean, you would know. We would.
Half of Americans would look like Simpsons characters because they'd be jaundiced. Seriously.
Yeah. I mean, if it was like this, it would. Because the reality is, and he says this in a judgmental way in the movie, I'm just saying, there are people that eat fast food every day. I don't give a fuck if they're adults and they can make their own choices, and I think you probably can do that and mitigate that harm, whatever, but we would know. You would know if eating fast food for a month wiped out your liver.
Yeah, God, for fucking sure. It's insulting. But, speaking of insulting, so we eventually also get to meet Alexandra, his then girlfriend, later wife, and then later became ex-wife because he cheated on her, and then married another woman and had a bunch of kids with her, and then he died, and then cheated on her, I think, at some point too. So Spurlock, of course, a great guy, very supportive, but she is a vegan chef. At the beginning of the experiment, Spurlock, who stood 6 feet 2 inches and had a body weight of about 185 pounds. So this was before the experiment, and the experiment, as we mentioned, he's going to eat McDonald's every day for 30 days, 3 square meals a day. He's got to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If they ask him to supersize, which is, of course, where the title comes, Supersize Me, he has to do supersize. He has to have everything on the McDonald's menu at least once, and that includes bottled water. So that's, of course, easily the healthiest thing on the fucking McDonald's menu. And he also is going to limit his amount of exercise, which this was the one that both you and I thought was fucking
That
stupid.
made me so mad. That's stupid. So there are 2 really stupid things with the rules. We've mentioned both of them. First, he says, if it's not at McDonald's, I can't eat it. Fine, fair enough that you're doing like an endurance type study. I can only drink water I buy from McDonald's. No, that is ridiculous.
Yeah, why can't you drink tap water? What the fuck is wrong with tap water? Like, what the fuck?
The limiting his exercise is, it predisposes this study to a certain result. So if you actually wanted the study to be accurate, and tell me if you agree, Taylor, he would do the same amount of exercise that he does. He would just live his life as he does while eating McDonald's. He even says, New Yorkers, we walk everywhere, but I'm not going to walk very much because I'm doing this study. Well, then what's the fucking point?
And that's the thing, though, too, because he says, like, well, I'm going to see what the average American does, but I'm going to do it in an extreme way, which already you're not doing what the average American does if you're doing it in an extreme way. But also, like, the thing is that, like, almost no Americans eat McDonald's for every fucking meal and only limit it to McDonald's for every meal, including water, which is, once again, stupid.
But nobody's doing that.
And also limiting your exercise to the average American, which, once again, if you're trying to do an extraordinary experiment, why not do an extraordinary amount of exercise too on top of it? Or even just do a normal amount of exercise for you, because you're already doing an extreme amount of exercise for an American already.
The thing to do, right, would have been, if he cared about it, just to live his life while eating this gross amount of McDonald's. The reasons I think he doesn't do this are twofold. Obviously, he wants to predispose it to negating his health. He wants that result. But secondly, I think that this is part of a wider agenda of, like, Morgan Spurlock kind of wanting to tut it like average Americans. That is the vibe of the whole movie. And if by limiting his exercise, he gets to imply, well, most people don't exercise. I need to mitigate my own exercise because I exercise more than most people. And most people are lazy and they may eat McDonald's every day and they sit at desks.
Yeah, it's so fucking stupid. Like, the whole experiment doesn't even make sense. And, like, later on, they'll show a bunch of things, like he gained 25 pounds in a month or whatever, which you're not going to do that solely from food no matter what, especially at his weight. Like, that's just objectively not possible. He would have to gain almost a pound a day. So he would have to eat at least 3,000 calories over what his, like, I think basic metabolic rate, I think it's called, or like something like that. Or what his threshold would be, you know what I mean? So he'd have to eat about 3,000 calories over that. And I'm sorry, if you're doing that, that's almost impossible. In a month, that's almost impossible.
He pretty clearly is doing that, because one of the things is that he is definitely eating more than he needs to, even after, like, multiple times in this film, he gets shakes. Can he not get a diet soda, which is also bad for you? Aspartame's bad. Does he need to get a shake as a drink, which is 1,000 calories? Like, after the first time he gets the shake, he could never get it again.
Or, there's like 7 or 8 sodas at McDonald's. So after the 7th soda, you could just drink Diet Coke for the rest of the time, if that's what you're going to fucking do.
His nutritionist implies that he's not doing that. Because when she talks to him, she says, you should stop getting Cokes or you should stop getting shakes. So he's continued to get them after he, quote unquote, needs to fulfill the needs of the study.
Yeah, it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. So yeah, it's just really fucking stupid. So yeah, he's eating roughly about 3,000 calories extra a day to gain 25 pounds in a month, which is theoretically possible, but you would have to purposefully do that, which, once again, I think defeats the point of the study, because if you're purposefully manipulating the results of the study, it's not a very objective fucking study. It just is not.
Well, it's a funny comparison, because you know who does when they want to gain weight for a movie?
Oh, yeah, actors do that. You know what? I was watching something about Rob McElhenney, of course, you know, Mac from fucking It's Always Sunny. Yes. In real life, in that one season when he gained a bunch of weight and then lost it the next season, what he did was he would like buy like a big tub, like a gallon of ice cream, let it melt, and he would just drink at least one of those every day to gain all that weight.
Well, yeah, he would like microwave Ben and Jerry pints of Ben and Jerry's and drink it. Yeah.
And that is true. Like if you're trying to bulk up and in a very unhealthy, they call it dirty bulking, and that's something that just you should just not do. It's just not good for you. But the way to do that is easily liquid calories and liquid fat. It's the quickest way to gain weight. Straight up.
That's
It is
so gross.
so easy. Like if there was this like fucking thing I saw a while ago that there's like I think it's like a Baskin Robbins like chocolate peanut butter something shake, and it's got literally 4,000 calories in it for an extra large. 4,000 calories.
Come on, man. And I eat like shit. I love garbage food. Like nobody needs that. Nobody needs that.
It's absolutely fucking crazy. All right. And having just looked up the shake now, it's actually 2,600 calories. It's the Oreo chocolate shake from Baskin Robbins. It's hilarious. 2,600 calories.
Why?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, they actually interview a guy who is the heir to the Baskin Robbins fortune in this movie, and they describe how, like, his uncle-in-law and his dad both died of, I think it was his dad died of diabetes, his uncle-in-law died of coronary heart disease or something like that. It was maybe the reverse, but either way, I thought that interview was very interesting to me, because, like, yeah, that guy could have probably either ran that company into the ground or did whatever, but he would have been, I mean, he's probably still fine anyways, but he could have fucking ran with that and became like a 100 millionaire or whatever. And the fact that he didn't end up doing that is actually kind of impressive, and I think is very brave of him to do that and like come out and talk about like the detrimental effects of the company that his, father and uncle-in-law founded.
What I thought was really interesting about that is that he talks about kind of sort of their psychology when he says, like, he talks about trying to tell his father, like, hey, like your brother-in-law like died because he's eating so much ice cream. And his dad was just like, no, like he couldn't consider that or deal with the possibility that this thing that he had been selling people his whole life could have been hurting people. And so he just shut down like the conversation about that. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a minor detail, but that beyond, the monetary ramifications, that someone could just be like, well, I don't want to consider that this is what I'm doing without knowing it, so I'm not going to address it.
Exactly. And yeah, we talk about the interviews, like most of the rest of the documentary outside of his stupid fucking experiment is actually pretty interesting information. And I will say pretty good public health information for a documentary that's like 20 plus years old at this point. He's able to find some pretty interesting like interview subjects. Well, he also does find Jared from Subway, so that's a very funny time capsule. But, in general, like, I will say most of the rest of the documentary that's not focused on Morgan fucking Spurlock is actually pretty good, I will say. Pretty solid information. Like, I have very, very little issues to pick with the rest of the documentary that's not him.
Well, like, my issues with this primarily are in the way it portrays overweight people, but kind of just the way it portrays the average American in general. So actually, it's a brief thing. The film opens, not to backtrack too much, on a bunch of very young children singing that, the silly Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken and a Pizza, that you sing when you're like in kindergarten. And the camera lingers. It's just these cute, smiling, happy kids at summer camp or whatever. And the camera kind of lingers on this bigger kid. And he's just singing the song. He's just singing the song they told him to sing. He's having a good time. Everyone's singing. But kind of the implication is like, this kid is singing a song about fast food and he's fat, and like, doesn't he know that he's putting this food on a pedestal? It's like, well, yeah, he's just being a happy little kid,
Yeah.
And that is the first image of the movie, and I immediately was like, that's so mean. That made me so angry. Because it's like, this just a little kid smiling and singing a song. Like, I would, you know what I mean?
The one thing I can say is that body positivity has came a long fucking way in 20 years, very clearly.
Well, and I'm not trying to do some, I know that there's like silly people in every movement, and I'm not trying to, like, it's good to watch what you eat. It's good to like manage your body however you want to feel comfortable. But like, when I see a smiling little kid singing a song about fast food, I don't go like, well, that kid is so fat, he shouldn't be singing about that junk food. And I question the values of any person that would think that or put that on film.
Yeah, there is certainly like a sense of like journalistic malpractice and like just, mean-spiritedness just by fucking doing that. Or also the other thing that they did in a lot of these documentaries, and I think Morgan Spurlock was probably a big inspiration for a lot of them doing this later on, is like filming people in public, like really big people, and just filming them from the the head down. And it's like, okay, Morgan, why don't you just go up to them and be like, hey, fatty fat, and see what happens, Morgan Spurlock. Why do you have to film them from 100 feet away, you fucking loser? Like, seriously.
Few things about it. So actually, I think that was pretty commonplace in quote unquote human interest stories. We're doing that in the late 90s is kind of when that took off. So it's just the thing that he's adopted,
Fair enough, yeah.
basically. But one of the things I thought is like, and I'm going to say something. I don't give a fuck about criticizing people's looks. I do it in my head all the time, but not really because of like their weight or whatever. But the reason I say that is because they show some of these people and they're like from, the neck down, and they have like guts or whatever, but they're pretty tan people. They're walking around with their shirts off. They're like at the beach or whatever. And I kept thinking, Morgan Spurlock is kind of a goofy looking guy. Who the fuck is he to be judging anyone's body?
Yeah, and that's the thing though, is that you mentioned something about like bad face, bad hair, and I'm like, well, his alcoholism might have been the reason behind his bad face and his bad hair. Yeah. To be honest, he's probably got fucking alcohol bloat.
And it's again, I don't give a shit about like I want people, like all kinds of people are attractive and can look cool and fashionable. But it's just like when I look at this guy, I think like, who are you to look at someone who's overweight and go, which he doesn't explicitly say, but it's said with the way that this is filmed. It's like, look at all of these big people, and it's like, yeah, but you're fucking nerd. Like,
yeah, you're some borderline skinny fat nerd. Like that's what the fuck you are.
He's absolutely skinny fat. And so am I. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, he's not like prime young Schwarzenegger or whatever. You know what I mean? Like he's not like some
he's not a Schwarzenegger, and he's not like Timothy Chalamet skinny or anything. It's like you just
he's kind of the worst of a lot of, and like I said, probably the alcohol bloat probably affected a lot of that. To be honest, he's also like his cheeks are always red too, and that's another one I noticed. He's got alcohol flush too.
He's got the little Irish kiss on his cheek.
Yeah. And also, I also do want to mention some of the other interviews was really funny. So one of them is Dan Gorski, who's still alive, by the way.
I love him. He's so cool. Fucking based.
No, based as fuck. He is a former correctional officer, I believe, in Fond du Lac. So, of course, not too far away from both where Brian and I grew up. But he's eaten, I think now he's eaten like something like 35,000 Big Macs in his life. And, looking at modern pictures of him, he looks like just a normal Wisconsin guy who's not 500 pounds. He's like a normal, like middle-aged, older, I think he's actually elderly now, but like that type of guy with just like a little bit of a beer gut, and that's it. He's eaten 35,000 Big Macs in his life. That's crazy. Like in the movie, he's actually like he's a pretty normal weight in the movie. He's eating like 20,000 Big Macs at that point or some shit like that.
I just want to infer a little bit about Gorski and why I think he's cool. Lives in Wisconsin. Mwah. Chef's kiss. We love it to see it. No, he was born in what, 1955?
Something like that. Yeah, I think he's like literally elderly at this point.
Yeah, in 1955, had his first Big Mac at age 18 in the early 70s, and mutton chops. John Lennon-esque bowl cut with a fucking rat tail and back. Skinny, like wireframe glasses with like round lenses around his eyes. This is like a really hip guy that you'd see at a record store in Portland now. And he's just like, this is like the Wisconsin version of a fucking 60s hippie. And he was like, I just love hanging out and eating my Big Macs.
So I'm looking him up right now just to be sure. So yeah, he was born in 1953 and he was actually born in Green Bay. Woo! Yeah. Green Bay guy. Based as fuck.
And he doesn't sit and tell people like, oh, actually, Big Macs are so good for you. I love, he makes jokes about the fact that he eats so many Big Macs and whatever all the time. But he also says like, no, I like Big Macs. This is what I like. I like him.
Yeah, he makes a joke at one point where he says like his wife says it'll be the end when she's putting him in blenders and like feeding it to him through a straw, which is like a good joke. That's a solid one.
It's funny. It's cute. It's also, and we're allowed to say it, this is a guy from Wisconsin. Skinniest guy from Wisconsin born in his time.
Well, also the guy who eats the most McDonald's, that's the skinniest Wisconsinite who eats that much, like even a quarter of that much McDonald's. Like,
well, he's getting more vegetables in those onions and lettuce than most.
Yeah. And we can say this because we're from Wisconsin. I want that to be very clear.
I was thinking about, one thing about Gorski, there's no way he gets fries with every Big Mac, right?
Oh, they even say, like, he very rarely gets the fries. Like, he almost only gets the Big Mac. Which, I mean, if you're looking at it from its constituent parts, just a Big Mac by itself, if you only eat, let's say you eat 2 of those and maybe, like, something else that's not horrible for you, you can still live a healthy lifestyle and just eat that amount of fast food every day. And clearly he has.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably also, I was thinking about this, Gorski has been doing this so long, and in his own particular way, and I don't want to speculate about what leads Gorski to have such particular fixations on patterns and repetition and habits.
Well, so
But
he does clinically have OCD. He has clinical
okay,
diagnosed
that's
OCD.
what I was kind of wondering. I didn't know that he was
And,
diagnosed. So that does.
in later on interviews, he doesn't do it in this movie, but I saw an interview of him later on while doing research, maybe like a handful of years ago, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I have OCD, and this is just the way I cope with having OCD." So I mean,
Cool.
so
So that's the hero of the movie, Dan Gorski.
yeah, and just in general, like once again, a lot of these interviews are very interesting. He actually Marcus Spurlock actually spends a lot of time in Wisconsin in this documentary, which is very interesting. He talks to Gorski. He goes to an alternative school in Appleton. There's some mention of Manitowoc, but I don't think they go to Manitowoc. I think it's like which supplies this food that Morgan Spurlock says is like the good alternative to like the fast foodification of school lunch, which I do agree. I think the fast foodification of school lunch is genuinely horrible.
And that section of the film where they're at that alternative school in Appleton and they're talking about this like fresh farm to table lunch program they have there, that was pretty interesting.
It is, and you know, we were talking about correctional stuff.
Administrations say that it costs about the same, right, as what most public schools get from the state.
Yeah, so the thing is that, so, and they talk about it in the movie, but there's two major corporations that supply almost all food to educational facilities. They do it at prisons, hospitals, etc. There's Sodexo and Aramark. So I worked at organizations that have been supplied food by both Aramark and Sodexo. And in general, these corporations lobby the government an insane amount of money to sell their shit food. Like the reason that like a lot of, you know, once again, schools, correctional institutions, hospitals, etc., get food from these organizations is not because it's necessarily cheaper. It's because they've been lobbied to such an insane degree that that's like the only option they can get. There's no realistic farm to table like public school system in this country that's able to do that because like Sodexo and Aramark would lobby to make sure that they're the only vendors that are allowed to do that. And they actually show another example of a school that does that. And of course, 99.9% of public schools do that, but they go to Naperville Middle School specifically, and they show these like middle schoolers eating just literal like garbage. Like it's just fries and like cakes and like just sugar. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of people talk about obviously this, you know, socio-political and class distinction on what people eat. And of course, that's certainly a factor in it. But Naperville, to the people who aren't familiar, Naperville is a pretty rich suburb of Chicago. You know what I mean? Like that is a community with money and resources and an extremely well-funded school system. And if that's what those kids are eating in that, imagine what the kids, and they do show like a little bit of one in West Virginia, and it's not that different, but like imagine what the kids who are eating in like inner city Detroit eat. Like seriously.
Well, like the thing with the school in Naperville, right, is that they have all of this like branded food, right? It's probably the big difference rather than just the state-funded like prison food.
Exactly, yeah. So it's, a lot of corporate junk food instead of just, the Aramark, you know, fucking Sodexo bullshit. But either way, it's like, kids are just started basically from the jump to eat garbage. And I think even though the Michelle Obama thing was mostly nonsense, because there's another interview that I want to highlight where a guy, he's like the main lawyer who's suing McDonald's, because that's the whole conceit of this movie is that there's a lawsuit against McDonald's that these two teenagers did that basically said McDonald's made me fat. I can see why that lawsuit was thrown out. That's a pretty bullshit premise to make a lawsuit on in the fucking first place. But this lawyer, right, he talks about like, well, it can't just be the fact that we don't exercise. It can't just be the food at home. It's got to be fast food. Well, first off, it could be all three of those fucking things. Because it is absolutely the food at home. It absolutely is the food at home. The food at home is also highly processed garbage for a lot of people. Yeah. It's not just fucking fast food.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things that's really frustrating to watch, and this is to Spurlock's credit, you know, we talk about there are things they do well, is while he's talking to, you know, the administration of the school in Naperville, she keeps saying, well, we want to teach kids choices, which is what you always hear in this. We want to educate them about nutrition so that they can feel empowered to make the right choices while not taking away that option from them. It's like, well, yeah, but they're not going to fucking do that. Like, no fucking 12-year-old is going to get fucking a fruit cocktail or whatever and pick the least healthy fruit dish there is instead of like fries.
That's the thing, though, is that like we expect, obviously, like children don't have agency. So you actually do have to like basically dictate almost everything that they do. Obviously, you can't dictate, you know, when they go to the doctor and they can't, you know, say their experiences, because obviously that would like, you know, lead to shielding of physical and sexual abuse and stuff like that. But in almost every other aspect, children are wards of their parents and guardians and like like school systems. Like, yes, schools should force children to not eat garbage. They should give them pretty much only healthy options. Like, I'm sorry. Like,
Well,
and not necessarily
well,
force them, like, fucking like hold their mouth open and give them something to eat. But like, if the option is give them just Hostess Ho-Hos and give them like, a braised chicken or whatever with a salad on the side, only give them the salad and the chicken on the side if that's the choice we have to have. Like,
well, and I
seriously.
guess it's even on a more, I mean, I agree, but even if you wanted to go more moderate with it and say like, well, first of all, maybe schools can be like, okay, if you're gonna get your fucking Hostess Swiss roll, you need to get some sort of actual protein. You need some sort of like green on your plate. I like obviously that's a hard thing, I guess, to have teachers examining every plate. But that to me, at least in theory, seems reasonable. The other thing that I was thinking is like lunchtime for kids, like in school, is this weird social time. And the food is kind of tied to that. And I feel like surrounding kids with fucking French fries and ding dongs and Ruffles potato chips and going like, I don't know, like kids would exclude the kid who wasn't eating all that fun shit. They would. If there's a kid that's like, I'm gonna get a fucking grilled chicken and asparagus, guess what? He would probably get picked on.
Yeah, you
So
would.
there's all these other pressures for kids to keep shoveling this trash into their mouth. Trash that, sorry, probably tastes better than whatever's coming out of the lunchroom.
Yeah. Oh God. But yeah. So and then eventually the documentary once again goes on a lot of these interviews. Some of them are really good. Some of them I think have pretty relevant health information even 20 years later. But I want to get to the very end of the documentary here where he goes to his various healthcare professionals. I think it was the GI and the cardiologist specifically. And they're just like, hey, you should stop this diet immediately. Your liver is failing. It's got to be the fast food, right? And they're like, yeah, it's interesting. I've only ever seen this in alcoholics, but for whatever reason, it's happening to you through fast food. This is very interesting. And they both like, one of them laughs and the other is just like, no, it literally has to be alcohol. Like, but for some reason it's happening due to food. So I'll tell you to stop eating the food because here's the thing, right? And like a lot of people, when I'm making this observation would think, well, why aren't the doctors just telling you to stop being an alcoholic? Well, first off, in medicine, you don't insinuate necessarily. If a patient tells you they're not doing something, you're never supposed to insinuate that they're actually lying and this is what they're doing. Morgan Spurlock said he was not drinking, he was non-alcoholic, and they have to go on that information because that is the subjective health information that he said. So they're trying to say like, hey, this is what you're telling me, but I'm only seeing this through alcohol. So they're doing their best legalese to just be like, please be honest with me. Tell me tell me why this is happening so you don't die. They're basically pleading with him to be honest so that they can actually give him realistic solutions so he doesn't fucking die. Like, seriously. And he later did die of this. Like, let's be clear.
Yeah.
So a lot of people watch that and they're like, oh my God, this guy died of almost died because of fast food. It's like, no, he literally died because of alcoholism and he wasn't honest about it. That's just the reality.
Yeah. And that, I think it's the general practitioner is the one who says, like, I would say to you, stop doing what you're doing because you're killing yourself and you could stop it by stopping doing what you're doing. And that's like how he says it. Like,
yeah,
he's
exactly.
like avoiding saying the phrase fast food.
Yeah. So, and like, just to be clear here, but this is the end of the review, so we're just going to say it. So Morgan Spurlock, once again, died 2 weeks ago. There was an article that he posted on his website in 2017 where he basically self-Me Too'd, and he admitted that he had been a lifelong alcoholic since the age of 13. He said he hadn't gone a week without drinking since he was 13 years old, and I assume that means during this documentary as well. So he is heavily drinking the entire time. That's probably also contributing to his weight gain on top of his eating shitty food. And he died of cancer. That was what was publicly stated in the obituary. And I'm 95% sure he died of liver cancer. I'd be shocked if he died of anything else. I would genuinely be shocked by that. Because, like, if you're going to spend 40 years, because he died, I want to say at 53, 54. So if you're drinking for 40 years straight as an adolescent to 53, your liver's like dead. And the fact that his liver's already failing when he's like 33, 34 when making this movie means he was a hardcore alcoholic.
He had said at some point, maybe in the little blog post that you were talking about, that at the time of filming, I think he was trying to quit drinking right as he was also undertaking making this film. So we might be seeing him at some stages like actually not drinking and going through withdrawal even, which is even funnier.
Yeah, there's one moment specifically where he's in the car and he's talking about getting the McGurgles and the McTingles, and that's obviously kind of a funny scene, but he like starts puking everywhere. And like, first off, if you're eating McDonald's for 2 days straight, you're not going to vomit everywhere unless you have food poisoning. Like, I'm sorry, that's not really a thing. You think you're just gonna vomit unless he like overate like so much that his body threw up, which it didn't really seem like he was overeating that much by that point. So I don't believe that was just because of McDonald's. That was probably alcohol withdrawals, especially the McTingles. The fact that he's shaking, that's alcohol withdrawals.
The shaking seemed like alcohol withdrawal. The thing with the puking, I wanted to ask you about because you are a vegetarian. So it occurred to me, and I don't know anything about this, that since he was right prior to filming, was he a vegetarian before starting?
No, he was not.
He became one. Okay.
Yeah, he ate, an omnivore diet, and then his partner basically made him eat a vegan dinner. That was her compromise. So he wasn't eating a plant-based diet, but he was eating what seemed to be outside of the alcohol abuse, seemed to be a pretty balanced diet from the seams of it.
Okay, because I was wondering if maybe he was a vegetarian and then started eating all this McDonald's. I was like, well, that might make someone throw up. I figured.
That's not the indication I got.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I remember them specifically talking about the vegan dinners. I remember that.
Because they're arguing about it later on. You're right.
Yeah.
She's telling him, she's arguing with him about why he doesn't become a vegetarian. So I think you are right.
And the movie ends with this very funny question where he says, who do you want to see go first? You or them? Well, you went out first, Morgan Spurlock, because McDonald's is still very popular, unfortunately.
Yeah. Like, the thing that really sucks about it is, like with the drug thing, this is the most famous critique, really, of fast food. I might say the book Fast Food Nation, which is infinitely better, of course, is a distant second. And it's kind of an embarrassment. It's kind of an embarrassment that now any apologist for fast food can point to and go, well, look at all this bullshit. Look at this fucking liar. All of the valid points he's made, which there are several throughout. Most of those aren't original observations by him, or it's just nutritional information or whatever, is paired with, again, this very contemptuous view of working class people, of just basically average Americans. That's pretty distasteful. Again, I don't want to, a guy's dead. He's not here to come on our podcast and debate us. But it's like, I don't want to be too rough, but it's like, I mean, this it seems like a pretty unpleasant guy. Sorry.
Yeah, and I did mention the Me Too thing. So he in that blog post, he explicitly mentioned that he had not only gotten sued because of sexual harassment, but he also had a sexual assault allegation in college that apparently didn't go anywhere in the legal process. So yeah, this guy, and he also said he cheated on every partner he ever had. So he cheated on all of his partners, sexual assault and sexual assault, sexual harassment, lifelong alcoholic, like not a good guy. Just objectively a bad guy, and to be fair, the alcoholism is like the least bad part of that.
Yeah, sure.
But this was a deeply flawed man who had so much supposed superiority over people very clearly. And yeah, just a bad guy, just an objectively bad guy. And I don't think the world is really worse off with him being gone. I'm just going to be honest. I just don't see that.
I won't go that far. Again, like, he had a mom, he had a family, he had people that...
Oh, you know what? That's the other thing in the documentary. He lies to his mom on the phone.
He does. He's straight, yeah.
He's like, oh, you can have a piece of my liver if you want. So it's like, oh, so you're going to basically extort your mom to, like, give her part of your life when you're actively killing yourself?
Yeah, and lying to your doctors.
Lying to everybody in your fucking life. Like, horrible.
I think the takeaway from this kind of is people loved this movie. That's what's crazy to me. This was a phenomenon. This is, as far as a piece of old millennial lore, it doesn't get much bigger than Super Size Me. Again, we were both shown it in school more than once. It was presented to us as high journalism. Would you agree with that, Taylor?
Yeah, there was also, in going through the Amazon reviews, we'll get through the Amazon reviews in just a second here. A lot of the Amazon reviews mentioned, a lot of the negative ones, that they bought the wrong copy. There is a specific educational version of this movie, along with the theatrical release of this movie. That's how widespread it is. This was government, sponsored to be shown in schools. That's why we all saw it, because it was a specific educational version. Yeah. So that's how much of a phenomenon this is. So yeah, it's just, oh God.
And but it's just, I mean, I've been not dancing around, but I haven't said that. This is deeply fat phobic. That's not a phrase that I use.
Yeah.
I don't use that phrase that often because I feel like sometimes it gets like any sort of term that kind of gets bigger than it initially was. It's kind of sometimes misapplied in certain discourse now, but this is a very mean and nasty movie. And I feel like when I watch this, when I see that this like cute smiling kid singing a funny song and the camera scare lingering on him, when I see these shots of people at the beach from their head down, I just think like, oh, people had to look at this. Like, this was shown at schools where there were like overweight kids that would have had to see it in front of all their peers. And what is this doing for them?
It's not
what
doing
is
anything
this
fucking good. I can
for
tell you that
anyone?
much.
And it's coming from fucking Morgan Spurlock, the fucking drunk serial cheater,
Yeah,
who looks like ass.
he honestly looks like a D-list gay porn actor, but like a bad gay porn actor, like a one who is like, oh, you're not going to be around very long because you're going to die. Like he looks so bad. He looks terrible.
He looks like a guy in the third act of Boogie Nights.
Yeah. But well, speaking of all that, I know we just talked about Amazon reviews, but I want to get into these Amazon reviews, Brian, because there was a cavalcade of people in these Amazon reviews. Everybody you could ever imagine. So from like your regular Amazon reviewer to like neolibs to like just assholes in general. Like there were so many types of people in these reviews. It's probably the most diverse opinions of any Amazon entry I've ever seen for a movie we've covered. It's crazy. So our first review here is from Blake Ballard, who gives us 5 stars. And the head of the review says, I like man that put burger in mouth. And the body of the review says...
I mean, this is a shit post.
It is a shit post. I want to be very clear. You're right. But the body of the review says, these other reviews are stupid. So I'm not going to even try to write a good one here. Instead, have another quote-unquote woke alternative. Man eat burger, get fat, I say haha, the end. You know who I think wrote this? I think Ron English wrote this. Which I know we didn't talk about Ron English, but his artwork that fucking Morgan Spurlock shows lovingly multiple times in this documentary is garbage. It's terrible.
And okay, it's not just that
and you know what it
shows his shitty art. It's Adbusters. That's what it reminds me of.
Well, not only that, but I watched it and I'm like, there's something really off-putting about this art, obviously other than the fact it sucks. But you know what this really reminds me of? It reminds me exactly of AI art. This looks exactly like AI art.
Well, listeners of the show will know that we are both strong opponents of AI. Pretty much every context, I would say. My reasons for disliking it are almost religious, but I won't get into them here, but especially in art. But looking at fucking Ron English's art, I thought, you know what? I like AI now. I want AI to put this guy out of a job. No, seriously though, the issue isn't just that he makes this mediocre art where he's like, what if the Starry Night was full of logos? It's that Spurlock calls him, like, underneath his name it reads artistic genius, and it's like, really?
Yeah,
genius?
Really? For this
pretty
shit?
talented.
Yeah.
He's a pretty talented painter, but like, do we think he's a genius?
He's legitimately, I think, the only artist that would, and you're right, would be put out of work by AI art. Because his art is indistinguishable from AI, seriously.
It looks very AI-esque. I mean, he's pretty skilled on a technical level, it seems, but like, boy, this is not clever. This sucks.
Yeah, this shit sucks. But speaking of shit that sucks, our next review here is fascinating. So Simon Turner gives us 2 stars, and the head of the review says, U.S. life expectancy hits record highs. And the body of the review says, the only response the ridiculous premise of this film needs is to note that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention just reported that Americans are living longer than ever, largely because of steadily lower death rates from heart disease, cancer, and stroke. This review has aged very poorly because the recent American life expectancy has gone down pretty significantly in the last couple of years. Although that's mostly due to deaths of despair, primarily like drug overdoses and stuff like that. But the average American life expectancy has gone down a couple of years in the last couple of years.
Is the author of this review implying that the average life expectancy has gone up because people saw Super Size Me?
Trust me, this shit goes to insane places. So just to finish out this review here, average life expectancy in the United States rose to a record of 77.6 in 2003, up from 77.3 in 2002. McDonald's has been around since 1955. I ranked some World Bank data on life expectancy around the world to discover that America's life expectancy puts us equal 4th among 151 countries, just 4 years behind Japan, the lone country where life expectancy is 81. But half the world's countries don't make it to 70. Spurlock relies on his wit and cinematic punch to convince people, rather than relying on facts like the ones above. Currently, my only other Amazon.com review is of Crichton's State of Fear, where he makes the case that an unholy trinity of politicians, lawyers, and media feed off each other to keep us all in an irrational state of fear. What better example of the media contribution to this fear-mongering than this anti-corporate diatribe? Like, this reviewer here, I think, is legitimately like a neoliberal. Like, he's
Yeah.
like, this anti-corporate asshole makes this documentary.
And you mean like in the Adam Smith sense, like actually like a neoliberal, like free market,
Yeah, because
wealth of nations guy.
especially with the amount of like, right-wing populism and, obviously a lot of people on the left wing, of course. Like, you don't really find a lot of people who are like, oh, you're just an anti-corporate fucking loony. Like, nobody ever talks. Like, even on the right wing, people are like, yeah, corporations are killing us. But obviously they think of it like as woke and they're hiring too many black people. But like, there's not really a whole lot of pro-corporate average Americans anymore. So this guy is just like a like neo-lib. Like, that's what the fuck this guy seems like to me. Like, well, if you look at the statistics, and, maybe back then that was true, but like I said, the life expectancy in America has gone down quite significantly in the last couple of years.
It's so funny. It's so strange to be like, I am so sick of these people that hate corporations. Because at face value, whether you're on the left or right in America, you're supposed to pretend that you hate the corporations, whether you're on the left or right?
No, exactly. Yeah. It's one of the, yeah, especially with like, yeah, right-wing populism and, a lot of some liberals have become radicalized to the left, but honestly, not that many. But even then, like a lot of liberals are like, yeah, corporations are ruining this country. Like there's maybe like 2% of normal Americans who are like pro-corporate and they're like, whatever they talk about. Like, and even then a lot of them will be like, well, I believe corporations have this right. And then I believe that other people have this right. Like nobody's ever like, anti-corporate in a way that like you're being a bigot against corporations. Like that's a very like 20-30-year-old thing to like
This is
bizarre.
You're always talking about racism. Well, you're racist against companies.
Yeah. Yeah, who did Mitt Romney write this review? Like what the fuck? Corporations are people, my friend. Like what the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, of all the reasons to be mad at this movie.
And then our last review here is from All That Mattered, who gives this 1 star. And the head of the review says, whatever, dude. And the body of the review says, a guy who goes on a McDonald's binge for a month to get away from his girlfriend's disgusting vegan food.
Based.
Making a quote-unquote health movie was just an excuse. And once again, as I mentioned earlier, Sean Mutaki and Carl Buchner want to know your location. They're planting bombs at this guy's house.
Yeah, no shit. This is my favorite review we've heard in a long time so far.
And honestly, like, I will say that some of her vegan recipes don't look very good. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, there's one point where there's like a vegetable pie, but it's like not very clearly anchored with anything. So it's just a bunch of like probably overcooked vegetables on top of like a dough. It doesn't look very good. I'm going to be honest. Yeah, just mush. Garbage. And that's also, to be fair, that's a lot of what's changed in the last couple of years, like vegetarian vegan food, because vegetarian vegan food, when this movie came out in 2003, and I used to eat that food because my sister was a vegetarian, and that shit was awful. It was genuinely inedible garbage. Like the amount that like vegetarian and vegan food has gotten better over the last couple of years could really not be understated. It's crazy.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll get like, and I mean, obviously this isn't really any better for you in a lot of ways, although ethically maybe it is. I get veggie burgers once in a while just for fun. And that's the thing you can do now. If you want to eat trash food and be a vegetarian or vegan, you can do that now.
Yeah, I just learned even like the actor Kevin Hart has his own like brand of vegan fast food restaurants. Like that's how popular it's becoming. Like there's celebrity restaurants that are just for vegan fast food now. Like you can just do that. And there's
I'm gonna look up.
Yeah, it's called Heart something. I can't remember what it's called. Heart House. That's what it's called. They're only in LA though, unfortunately. But I've heard I've heard they're surprisingly good for celebrity restaurants. So I mean, hey, whatever.
Wait, so Kevin Hart's a vegan?
Yeah, apparently he's a vegan.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I fucking respect that. And there's actually
me too.
There's a small fast food restaurant chain near me. I think they're opening up a third location, but I've had their burgers, and to be honest with you, they're like indistinguishable from fast food burgers too. They're actually really
well. Like when you were here, I don't know if this is only in PNW. I think it is. We had Next Level Burger, right?
Yeah, I remember I went to Seattle and I saw them on the street. So I think I'm gonna guess they're probably only a PNW thing, but I could be
pretty good.
That. Yeah,
pretty good.
Solid. Pretty solid. Oh, man. So, yeah, that is our review of Super Size Me. And do we have any final thoughts before we end this episode and get to our pluggables, Brian? I have some final thoughts, and I'm sure you fucking do, too.
Yeah, actually, my final thoughts this time, pretty simple. I would pretty much not recommend this movie to anyone unless you're watching it for the purpose that we are, as like a time capsule. There is some useful and interesting information about it in it, but I feel like in the years since, that's all become a lot more accessible and a lot more widely known. Again, there's better resources where you can learn about the farming out of kids of public schools to corporations, or about like the health risks and of fast food or the benefits of veganism and vegetarianism. And just even the good information here, it comes from the premise of the movies a lot. You can get this information elsewhere, and you don't need to deal with Morgan Spurlock's smug fucking face, his smug fucking voice, or just all this bullshit. As a time capsule, it's kind of fascinating, but it's annoying. It's a mean-spirited movie that's very nasty, and I don't know if it would be much better now, but it would be better, I'm sure.
Yes, I'm going to basically parrot everything you said. Yeah, I would not recommend this movie in almost any kind of capacity other than obviously watching it from, once again, if you saw this in middle school, high school health class back then and just wanted a refresher on what this documentary was, I wouldn't recommend this for any general health information. I think some of the health information here is correct, but a lot of it is inaccurate. You're right. I think it's mean-spirited. I think Morgan Spurlock was a contemptible human being in a lot of different ways. I wouldn't say he's like an outright monster, but like he's out of the subjects, especially the documentaries and like, more nonfiction things that we've covered. I think he's the worst person we've talked about. Because Arthur Chu is just kind of a failure and a loser. This guy was just a malicious individual in every single way. Like he lied. He was a manipulator and abuser, just like a bad person. He was like just a bad person.
Well, for Arthur Chu, just to be fair, he logged off and he's probably fine now. As long as he chilled out and learned to be nice to girls, he's fine.
Yeah, I totally meant to mention this on like another episode, but I actually saw him like maybe a couple weeks ago as of recording. He was on Jeopardy on a new episode.
How'd he look?
He looked pretty rough and he got third place.
Arthur, maybe just stay offline a few more years.
Yeah. Yeah, get a refresher on some of that trivia. Maybe.
Yeah,
But anyways, yeah, like Morgan Spurlock was just a bad man. He was a bad man who made a lot of bad decisions and hurt a lot of people along the way, either directly, obviously through the people he cheated on, and of course the sexual harassment and possibly the rape that he committed, or also just obviously the indirect from all the people who took a lot of this health advice at face value and didn't realize that it was based on a completely faulty study on every single capacity. Like the fact that all the other health information in this movie is like generally pretty accurate, I think is more damning than the fact that he did all this research. But like the thing that drew people, like I mentioned it to you, it's basically proto YouTube clickbait. Like that's what
it is.
Like the fact that he had to fucking, I guess, shield the valid points with his complete bullshit as like the main selling point, to me is like, that's like some of the worst kind of yellow journalism you can do. And I hate it. I fucking
hate it. That for me is what sucks. Like the Me Too stuff is bad. I don't know enough about it. Sounds like by his own admission, he sexually harassed people. So like that sucks. The serial cheating thing sucks. And it's not the type of person I'd want to be. That's also more like someone's personal stuff that I have no idea if he apologized to the people in those relationships or, tried to learn from that. So I'm not going to speak to like any of that here, but just the fact that, he lied in this movie. The thing, like you said, the thing that brought people to see this movie and made it a phenomenon was a lie. The very study was a lie. And that invalidates, unfortunately, the good information that's in this movie. It draws that all into question to people when they watch this and then find out he fucking lied.
Exactly. And like there was a Swedish study that tried recreating these results, and they found that even among most of the conditions that he followed, in fact, they actually did follow the reducing of exercise thing. Like they gave these, because it was a bunch of college students, so they gave them like bus passes so they wouldn't walk as much. And they found that they did gain weight, obviously, as you would from this.
But yeah, of course.
They gained on average like 8-9 pounds, not 25 pounds. Like,
yeah, they didn't have liver failure.
They didn't have liver failure. They didn't have bloat and like blush. They didn't have shakes and vomiting. So God, yeah. But yeah, needless to say, I would not recommend this documentary. In fact, I personally think, and I'm still glad I chose this, but I think this is my least favorite thing that we've covered on the show. Even worse than Tomorrowland, even worse than, fucking Law Abiding Citizen. Like this is like a contemptible movie in a lot of ways. And it's just unfortunate because it's just Morgan Spurlock. Well, actually, Jared Fogle is contemptible in this movie too, obviously. But like most of the people in this movie are generally like good, upstanding people who are trying their best outside of Jared Fogle and Morgan Spurlock. But Morgan Spurlock is unfortunately the guy who made it.
Another devastating. Now that you remind me of the Jared Fogle thing, I know we're running long. At some point, Jared Fogle, a like teen who is struggling with her weight, comes to Jared Fogle for advice and to confide in him and he says something like, he basically kind of like pressures her into like buying more Subway. He goes like, well, you got to decide to make that change. No one's going to make it for you. And, it is hard, but you got to do it. And this girl is like devastated. She's like, yeah, I wanted to talk to him because he thought he'd understand what I'm going through, but I can't afford to buy 2 Subway sandwiches a day like he can. And I just don't know what else to do.
Well, and that's so just going into a little bit of Jared. So obviously, as people who I'm sure everybody knows this point, but Jared Fogle is now in federal prison because
he's getting a different kind of footlong now.
Unfortunately, but he raped a bunch of children, and it's just bad all around. Film children, just serial sexual predator, like Jimmy Savile level. He's like the Jimmy Savile of fast food. Bad guy. But, talk about bullshit studies. What he did was also bullshit. Like, yes, he did eat 2 Subway sandwiches a day, and, he did lose a lot of weight. That is true. But he did it in a way that was not medically sound. It was not medically advised. He, at one point, I think it was like 450 pounds or something. He had those giant pants that he, fucking paraded around. And of course, his entire career was just trying to get into smaller pants, if you know what I mean. That was a bad joke I saw in a YouTube comment. But anyways, like, his whole thing was like, yeah, he did this really shitty, like, not medically sound diet. He also walked a shit ton. They don't talk about that. Like, he walked around his college campus like all day on top of it. So he's eating like 1,200 calories a day, plus exercising in a way that's like anorexic, bulimic level unhealthy. So he did it. He basically just like did a complete, all pun intended, but he went on essentially cold turkey of eating food other than just 2 long 6-inch Subway sandwiches every day or whatever. And the way he afforded it, Brian, and this is also very true, and I think also kind of revelatory for his later stuff, but he ran a sort of underground porn tape trading business in college. That's not a joke.
Yeah, I have heard that.
That's how he was able to pay for his college tuition and all the Subway sandwiches. He didn't work basically during that entire time. He just basically sold porn movies out of his fucking apartment complex.
True story. When I was in high school, my brother had a friend who went on a couple dates with Jared while he was like famous, and she told us all that he was like a big pervert. And then we said, she's lying. She's making up stories. That sounds crazy. There's no way that's true. But all the stuff she told us was pretty consistent with what we later learned about Jared.
I had never heard this story. That's wild.
True fucking story. She was like, yeah, Jared said he wanted me to act like I was 6 years old. And we were like, that's a fucking lie. Because that sounds like a lie if you hear that in like 2007 or whatever, right?
That's crazy.
We were like, that's a fucking lie. She went, yeah, he was really gross. And we were like, she's fucking lying. She's like lying for like attention. No.
And of course, I made the joke about getting the smaller pants, but there's a reason why Jared hated childhood obesity. Let's be very clear here.
Oh.
I mean, I'm being serious, though. I genuinely think that was part of his motivation, too.
Well, and it's also just the fact that he got invited to schools. He got invited to youth groups. He got to hang around kids all the time.
Yeah, just a very bad man. Just a very bad man in every way. So, and he'll be in prison, I think, for the next 10 years, I think. At the very least.
If I could trade Morgan Spurlock to get rid of Jared Fogle, I would do it.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we keep talking about how shitty Morgan Spurlock is, but he is the second worst person in this documentary.
Yeah.
Oh, God. So, yeah, that is our review of Super Size Me. So let's get into our pluggables here. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on Twitter.com. And as well, please follow us on both our YouTube and our Spotify channel, where we are uploading every episode simultaneously to both platforms. And of course, as always, please donate to the Lucifer and the Father campaign. Of course, our good friends Scott, Sean, and Robert are creating a beautiful little series. They're getting more donations every day, but they still got a lot of ways to go. So if you have any amount of like money that you can find in your couch cushion, or you just got a little bit of extra money in your paycheck or something, give 10, 20, 30 bucks over to them. They're making a great little series. They're great guys. They've been great friends of the show, and we want to see the next episode of this fantastic series.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, please donate to the Lucifer the Father campaign. They're working really hard at it. They've been great friends to the show. We want to help Sean and Scott out and the whole crew. They're great people. They've been very good to us. Please follow the Millennials Are Old Facebook page and Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram. Likewise, if you would like to see what I'm watching and reading and listening to while thinking about everything for the podcast and kind of what else I'm putting in my warped brain, you can follow me on Instagram at JLoBiafra. That's usually where I start posting about a lot of what I post there will eventually end up subjects for episodes. I have found that wasn't intentional, but it ends up happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, definitely follow us on all of our social media platforms. We are gaining subscribers and followers every day. Like straight up, every episode we get at least one or two more followers on all platforms. So please let's help us. I want to get our goal. I want at the end of the year, I want to get to about 100 subscribers on YouTube. That's one
Yeah.
goal. And I think we're getting pretty close to that at this point. We've got about 68 as of recording right now, which is pretty solid.
I would like not necessarily for engagement or whatever, even though I know that's the whole name of the game, or whatever. But if anyone follows or is, a regular listener and has a thing that they want to, it's like if you want to argue with us about something, if you don't like our takes or you want us to talk about something or you feel like we were glib or surface level about something, I would like to get more kind of discussions like that because Taylor and I, like, that's how we like to talk about shit. Like we like to kind of get into the weeds about stuff in different perspectives. And certainly there's more perspectives than just our two on Super Size Me on something that massive,
Oh, yeah. I think, honestly, up until he died, I would say we were probably in the minority on describing on how bad of a guy Morgan Spurlock is, would be my guess. Like, we're definitely some of the first people to talk about how bad of a person he was. Regardless of the factual inaccuracies of this movie, because a lot of people have talked about that, but, like, just talking about how bad of a person he is and how, like, mean-spirited he is, I haven't really heard a lot of those specific criticisms of Morgan Spurlock in this movie.
Yeah, maybe in our specific spheres of the internet that we were in, like you were on Reddit and I was on something awful, and definitely heard some of that discussion probably in like nerd circles where people are talking about documentaries or whatever. But just as far as like in the wider discourse, I feel like this is only very recently, maybe even with the Me Too stuff, have I started to see things about Morgan Spurlock just being, kind of a jerk.
Yeah, just kind of a mean guy.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Oh, God. But yeah, so that is our episode here. And before we go to bed, I'm going to eat a half a pound of fries, which that was another part of the documentary I forgot to mention. There's a specific moment he's like, well, you don't have to eat a half a pound of fries for dinner every night. And I'm like, it's really funny is I literally ate a half a pound of fries just before that scene tonight. And I'm like, oh, thanks for calling me out, Morgan Spurlock.
I mean, it's been said many times, but this documentary makes McDonald's look pretty tasty.
Yeah, like straight up, like, and he even talks. Well, there's one scene where they find like a hair in his parfait, which is a pretty irrelevant point in the movie.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, like,
that.
the old McDonald's food looks a lot better than the modern McDonald's food. Like, straight up, it looks tastier.
Yeah, no, it does. It does, and that's what I remember. Whenever they chose to this in school, we'd all be like, "I want some McDonald's now."
Yeah, because like I actually went to the McDonald's headquarters the other day and I banged on the door. Like, no, I didn't actually do that. But I went to
and
you
nailed a copy of the Super Size Me DVD to the door. It's like Martin Luther.
Yeah. But yeah, I went to the headquarters in Chicago and I went to their World Kitchen where they have like limited edition, like worldwide items for sale in America. And like even some of those were objectively better than a lot of what you get in America. It was kind of crazy. Like the quality.
That sounds fun. I was jealous when you were telling me about that. That sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, shit, dude. If you ever come back to the Midwest and you just want to spend like a weekend in Chicago or something, we'll do a Chicago trip. Trust me. I'll be willing because it's only a 90-minute drive for me. I'll fucking do that.
Yeah, if I would be down. I am interested in taking a trip to Chicago. Before I would come, I might take a trip to Milwaukee eventually, but I would do Chicago before then, I think.
No, hell yeah. And yeah, if you want to do that shit, yeah, we can go to the fucking arcade and go to McDonald's and do all the crazy shit there 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I could still plan to visit my family from there if I was in, Chicago for a week. Maybe my brother could drive up and see me. That'd be cool.
Yeah, fuck yeah, dude. All right, but yeah, so I'm going to go and eat my fat ass to bed. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that fat, but I'm going to go to sleep and cry just wishing that Morgan Spurlock was still here. I'm just going to obviously cry because that's obviously the impression that we've gotten that we miss Morgan Spurlock very deeply. So
yeah, I'm going to get that Baskin Robbins Oreo shake because I think I like to eat like that right before bed because it enhances my dreams and makes them less boring.
Absolutely. So yeah, the only thing that will help us old millennials fall asleep is our nostalgic memories of eating shitty fast food. So I'm going to get some DoorDash real quick and I'm going to fall asleep. So have a good night, everybody. Hope you all have a good night too.